The film opens with Cha Min, a wealthy young man, perched on a rooftop with a drink, contemplating suicide. His wedding is just days away, but his fiancée has vanished, leaving only a dismissive, hurtful text message that has driven him to despair. He hesitates, looking down with fear, when a sudden gust of wind nearly sends him over the edge. Dangling precariously, he manages to call his friend, Se-yeon. Just then, in a bizarre twist, a mysterious glowing stone flies past, sweeping Cha Min off the building. As he lies dying, his soul leaves his body, revealing a surprising disparity. While his physical form was unremarkable, his spirit is strikingly handsome. The next morning, Cha Min awakens to a doorbell, startled to find his face transformed into a much more attractive version. It turns out two otherworldly beings, using the mystical abyss stone, resurrected him. They, too, are surprised by his altered appearance, completely different from when he died. Later, Cha Min catches sight of his reflection, mesmerized by his new handsomeness, pausing to admire himself. The beings, witnessing this self-admiration, mistake his behavior for madness. Back in the real world, Cha Min opens the door to his mother and her friend. His mother doesn't recognize him and is bewildered when he calls her Mom. Quick thinking, Cha Min pretends to be a college friend to conceal his new identity. After they leave, he tries to call his fiancée, Hee-jin, but can't reach her. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Ko is having a streak of bad luck. Someone just slashed her tires, and last month, her car window was smashed. As she's about to confront the culprit, her colleague Jae-wook stops her, explaining the delicate situation. The man standing in the rain protesting is the father of Mi-jin, a murder victim from 2010. The man, a lieutenant in a patrol unit, had his daughter murdered in his own patrol area, which is why he continues to protest, unable to let go. As Prosecutor Ko gets into her car, she receives a call from Cha Min, complaining about the disastrous blind date Se-yeon set him up on. Suddenly, she notices a man lurking near her car. She confronts and subdues him, only to remove his hat and reveal a strikingly handsome face that is completely her type. Unbeknownst to her, this is Cha Min. He's about to ask her for a drink when he receives a text message that his fiancée is at the airport. He rushes off, searching frantically but failing to find her. That evening, Prosecutor Ko drinks heavily. Jae-wook, concerned, offers to take her home, citing a dangerous criminal case she handled the previous week. Se-yeon declines, insisting she can manage. Walking home, she bumps into a street cleaner and gets into an argument. Later, Cha Min, learning of Se-yeon's drunken state, returns with hangover medicine. He stumbles upon the street cleaner, now murdered, and calls for an ambulance. Horrified to find no pulse, Cha Min uses the abyss stone to revive him. However, when he goes outside to direct the paramedics, the street cleaner is gone. Cha Min goes to Se-yeon's apartment, only to find his phone dead. Seeing the lights on, he calls up to her from the street, but gets no response. He leaves the hangover cure at her door and heads home. The next morning, the police arrive at Prosecutor Ko's apartment, discovering she has been brutally murdered. Cha Min, hearing the news, rushes over, devastated to learn of Se-yeon's death. He's consumed with guilt, wishing he had gone up to see her. Overcome with grief, he sobs uncontrollably. The police are now searching for Cha Min, unaware of his changed appearance and identity. The following day, Cha Min secretly attends Se-yeon's funeral. After everyone leaves, he approaches her, weeping and unable to accept her death. Suddenly, he remembers the abyss stone and tries to resurrect her. Despite his attempts, nothing happens, and he leaves, heartbroken, so as not to interfere with the funeral proceedings. However, just after Cha Min departs, Se-yeon is revived. Seeking shelter from the rain, she encounters a crying young man and asks to borrow his phone to call her family. As they walk and talk, he fails to recognize her. Suddenly, Se-yeon sees her family and relatives holding her picture, mourning her death. She runs to them, crying and insisting she's not dead, but they think she's crazy and try to shoo her away. Reaching her car, Se-yeon discovers her face has changed. Witnessing this, Cha Min realizes this is his friend, Se-yeon. He pulls her aside into an underpass, revealing himself as Cha Min and explaining that he brought her back to life. Se-yeon is incredulous. The handsome man before her is spouting nonsense, sounding like a lunatic. To convince her, Cha Min recites the names of her ex-boyfriends and details of their shared past. Seeing the Abyss Stone and hearing these personal details sways Se-yeon, but she remains skeptical, vowing to investigate further. She goes to Jae-wook, intending to borrow his car to visit her own burial site. He stops her, holding her hand tightly, confused by her strange request, as he doesn't recognize her. As Se-yeon tries to explain, flashes of her brutal murder flood her mind, causing her to collapse. Luckily, Chaemin arrives just in time to catch her. Jae-wook is suspicious, especially when Chaemin keeps calling the unconscious woman Se-yeon. Chaemin rushes her to the hospital, where she thankfully recovers after some rest. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Se-yeon receives a mysterious note and goes to Se-yeon's grave. He digs it up, only to recoil in horror the body is gone. The next day, Se-yeon visits her own grave, mourning her death and vowing to find her killer. Chaemin and Se-yeon visit the murder scene, where Chaemin is horrified by the bloodstains. A cleaner arrives, and they narrowly avoid suspicion by pretending to be relatives visiting from out of town. Chaemin is now a wanted man, considered the prime suspect in Se-yeon's murder. Unable to use their bank cards, they are running low on cash, unsure how to survive. Se-yeon, ever resourceful, takes Chaemin to a pawn shop. Knowing his wealthy background, she pawns his expensive belongings for cash. They celebrate their return from the dead with a meal and drinks. At checkout, Se-yeon sharp eye spots expired items on the shelves. She uses this to leverage a free meal from the terrified server, promising not to report him to his boss, but reminding him of the basic principles of give and take. Chaemin's family is distraught by the news of his alleged crime, unable to believe their kind and gentle son could be capable of murder. Later that night, Chaemin and Se-yeon arrive at Se-yeon's mother's house. It's late, and they're alone in a confined space. Chaemin, aware of his previous feelings for Se-yeon, assumes she might have forgotten his attraction to her. He pulls her in front of a mirror to look at herself. He's no longer flustered. She's no longer his type. He points out that Se-yeon always valued appearances and rejected him based on his looks. Now, with his transformed face, he suggests that she should be the worried one. They settle down for the night, using toilet paper rolls as pillows. The next day, Chaemin and Se-yeon visit the shop owner to request CCTV footage. After reviewing the tapes, they spot a suspicious taxi. At the same time, Jae-wook leaves the hospital and receives a frantic call from Hee-jin, Chaemin's fiancé. She's trapped in an abandoned building, and someone with a club is searching for her. Chaemin and Se-yeon stop at a fast food restaurant. Chaemin keeps checking his phone, desperate to contact Hee-jin. Se-yeon takes the phone and turns it off, reminding him that he's a wanted man and needs to lie low. Their priority is finding the real killer and clearing his name. Walking down the street, brainstorming how to return to the prosecutor's office, they witness an older woman berating an elderly man after he accidentally drops a pile of papers. The woman's lack of empathy triggers a memory for Se-yeon. She recognizes the woman as someone who works at the police station. Seizing the opportunity, she changes into a police uniform and assumes the identity of Officer Lee Mi-do to investigate the case. Back at the station, using Mi-do's identity, they discover that Mi-do is Detective Park's girlfriend. Unaware that the couple has broken up, they text him, asking for help tracing the taxi's license plate. Detective Park, flattered, believes Mi-do wants to reconcile. He helps with the request, but after waiting all day for a response, receives nothing. That night, armed with the taxi owner's information, Chaemin and Se-yeon go to Park Kaiman's house. Unable to get a response, they sneak inside, only to discover that Kaiman is Mi-jin's father. He's agitated, holding a threatening letter he just received. He's furious because he believes he killed this person, yet they are somehow alive. Meanwhile, Se-yeon discovers a room covered in photos. Among them, she finds a picture of Dr. Oh, a suspect from her previous investigation. To Chaemin's horror, he recognizes the man. On the night of Se-yeon's murder, he found Dr. Oh lying lifeless on the ground, and, in a moment of panic, used the Abyss Stone to revive him. Could Chaemin have inadvertently resurrected a serial killer with the Abyss Stone? Over at Oh's house, Kaiman had been invited in for tea. However, when young Cheol offered him an empty cup, it startled Mr. Park. Meanwhile, the police, having caught wind of the investigation, were staking out Oh's place, waiting for a signal from Prosecutor Se-yeon before making their move. Impatient, Detective Park decided to act alone, ringing the doorbell. He noticed a familiar-looking taxi and then realized the gate was unlocked. Just as Jae-wook arrived to stop him, Detective Park entered the house without a warrant. Our protagonists were grappling with the case, unsure which of the two men was the real killer. As the three of them stepped inside, they were shocked to find Dr. Oh lying on the floor, barely alive. They immediately called for an ambulance. Detective Park was surprised to see his ex-girlfriend at the scene and rushed to embrace her, filled with concern. Rewinding an hour, it turns out Kaiman's cop held his daughter's necklace. Enraged, Oh suddenly stabbed Kaiman in the stomach. Then, in a shocking twist, young Cheol killed Mr. Park. He revealed that Park's daughter, Mai-jin, was a thief and that he had killed her twice already. Furious, Mr. Park fought back, demanding justice for his daughter. At the hospital, Detective Park questioned Oh, but young Cheol feigned memory loss due to his age, misleading the police. Suddenly, he spotted Se-yeon, wondering what she was up to. Outside, Jae-wook searched for young Cheol's room, hoping for a face-to-face encounter to see if they recognized each other. The abyss stone suddenly heated up in front of a different room. Annoyed, Jae-wook almost smashed it when Prosecutor Se-yeon arrived to greet him. Cha-min, feeling awkward, was rescued by Se-yeon, who pulled him away. Meanwhile, Mr. Park, nursing his injuries, walked home, sensing he was being followed. Suddenly, Kaiman jumped out, spraying the two trailing detectives with a fire extinguisher. He then dashed across the street, attempting to escape. The leads returned home after drinks. Hee-jin acted unusually affectionate towards Cha-min, but he seemed oblivious, offering her water before leaving. Standing outside Hee-jin's door, Cha-min reminisced about their past. He reviewed Kaiman's diary, searching for clues, unaware of Kaiman's whereabouts. Suddenly, a location caught his eye, the Chuncheon Memorial. He discovered Mr. Park there, intending to take his own life after receiving a call from young Cheol, who falsely claimed Oh was dead and Mai-jin avenged. Cha-min intervened, rushing Park to the hospital, unwilling to let young Cheol escape justice. Upon waking, Mr. Park couldn't speak, leaving Cha-min with a burning question: was Park responsible for Se-yeon's death? Meanwhile, it was revealed that Oh had confined Hee-jin. Young Cheol bandaged her wounds while she rambled, prompting him to gag her. Later, on a bus, he retrieved a speaker. Unbeknownst to him, Mai-jin's necklace, now in Mr. Park's possession, contained a listening device planted by young Cheol. He contemplated starting his hunt. Young Cheol visited the hospital searching for Park, but couldn't find him. After inquiring with a nurse, he encountered Se-yeon and Dong Cheol, who had been alerted by Cha-min. The three checked the intensive care unit, learning from a nurse that someone had taken Park for a walk. Reviewing security footage, Cha-min revealed that Kaiman had given him Prosecutor Ko's ID and confessed to Oh's involvement in Se-yeon's death. Meanwhile, young Cheol was driving Mr. Park to an undisclosed location, intending to kill him. Annoyed by the taxi driver's prying, young Cheol murdered him en route. Se-yeon, deciphering a note left by Park, sped off in pursuit, terrifying her passengers. Despite Park's pleas, Se-yeon accelerated. Amidst the panic, Park managed to alert Prosecutor Se-yeon. Young Cheol pulled into an alley, helping Park out. Suddenly, Kaiman, regaining consciousness, attacked young Cheol, choking him against a wall. During the struggle, young Cheol stabbed Kaiman. Arriving on the scene, others found Kaiman dying. Certain that young Cheol couldn't have gone far, the detective and prosecutor split up to search. Neighbors gathered at the scene. Cha-min spotted Hee-jin in the crowd. She quickly slipped away. Cornered by Prosecutor Se-yeon, young Cheol remained defiant, revealing a shocking truth. His blood flowed through Jae-wook's veins. Meanwhile, the leads chased Hee-jin, but lost her after colliding with a motorcycle. They overheard Detective Park calling Prosecutor Se-yeon. A seriously injured Jae-wook revealed the attacker wasn't the Oh young Cheol they were looking for. Later, at the hospital, everyone watched over Mr. Park and Prosecutor Se-yeon. Despite the slim chances, Cha-min insisted on searching for Hee-jin. Se-yeon argued against it, believing Hee-jin was abroad and their relationship was over. She questioned why he couldn't move on. Undeterred, Cha-min searched throughout the night. The next morning, Se-yeon joined Cha-min's search, recognizing his unwavering resolve. She vowed to support him until he could let go. They went to the police station, asking Detective Park to help find Hee-jin. Se-yeon's charm persuaded him. Unexpectedly, Hee-jin arrived, wanting to report a murder Se-yeon's and provide information about Cha-min. Unaware of Cha-min's new appearance, she reported him as she stood within earshot. During questioning, Hee-jin attributed their divorce to Se-yeon, claiming Cha-min used their dates to provoke Se-yeon's jealousy. She learned about the case after returning from a trip, but found it odd how Cha-min knew her new address. Instead of reconciliation, he focused on a lost bracelet engraved with Se-yeon's name. Observing from behind the mirror, Se-yeon recalled Cha-min's interactions with her in his new form, questioning her own gullibility. Cha-min waited outside, confronting Se-yeon when she emerged. Suspicious, she avoided him. He approached Hee-jin, but someone in a car pressured her to leave. The police, armed with Cha-min's previous photo, launched a search. Using the bracelet and other information, they exhumed Se-yeon's grave, only to find it empty. Cha-min shadowed Se-yeon at the police station, prompting her to take him to a citizen verification machine. The results confirmed his identity, but Se-yeon remained suspicious. Cha-min was incredulous that after so many years, she doubted him, claiming he'd instantly recognize her reincarnated self without explanation. Mid-argument, a news report announced Cha-min's arrest warrant and featured his distraught fiancé, Hee-jin. She tearfully pleaded for him to surrender for their child's sake. That night, Cha-min used his old phone to arrange a meeting with Hee-jin. The police learned of his resurrection. Overhearing this, Se-yeon immediately commandeered the delivery truck Cha-min had just used. At their meeting, Cha-min witnessed Hee-jin being struck by a hit-and-run driver, unaware it was Oh. With Hee-jin critically injured, Cha-min tried to use the Abyss Stone, but it failed. Remembering it only worked when the soul and body were separated, he took Hee-jin, leaving Se-yeon alone. After reviving and hospitalizing Hee-jin, who now bore a slight scar, Cha-min learned she had lied about their child on television. He took her to his home for safety. Privately, Se-yeon and Cha-min analyzed the incident, concluding it was attempted murder. Only Kai-man, who had seen the driver, could help, but he remained comatose. Cha-min rushed to the hospital, intending to use the Abyss Stone on Kai-man. Se-yeon followed, finding Kai-man unharmed. Calling Cha-min from outside Kai-man's room, she heard a noise from a storage area. Horrified, she discovered a mortally wounded Cha-min, who uttered a few words about the Abyss Stone before dying. The Abyss Stone, upon its owner's death, transferred ownership to the next person to touch it, the murderer, Oh Young-cheol. Just minutes before Cha-min arrived at Kai-man's hospital room, he encountered a doctor. He tried to inquire about the patient but was brushed off. In the process, the Abyss Stone accidentally fell at the doctor's feet. Cha-min was shocked when the doctor picked it up, as only someone resurrected by the stone could see it. He immediately grabbed the doctor's arm and pulled down his mask, revealing Young-cheol. Young-cheol was surprised to be recognized despite his altered appearance. Fearing exposure, Oh Young-cheol led Cha-min to a storage room. Meanwhile, alerted police arrived at the scene and documented everything. Se-yeon, distraught, could only weep on Detective Park's shoulder. Later, she tried to prevent him from collecting the deceased's identification, unable to explain the complicated situation. Suddenly, a subordinate rushed in with urgent news. A body matching Cha-min's DNA and appearance had been found on a mountain, though heavily decomposed. Se-yeon vehemently denied it was Cha-min. Prosecutor Seo, in charge of the case, was reluctant to investigate further, believing the sole suspect was dead. The police moved quickly to close the case and make a public announcement. Hearing the news, Se-yeon angrily confronted Detective Park. Frustrated, she told him to take a fingerprint scanner and follow her. Dong-cheol scanned the prints of the body in the hospital, confirming it was indeed Cha-min. He was incredulous, suspecting a malfunctioning scanner. Se-yeon produced Cha-min's wallet and phone as further proof. Finally convincing him, she pleaded with Detective Park to postpone the case closure and press conference for one day, promising to find evidence to solve the case. Later, Se-yeon met with Hee-jin to explain the resurrection process. They were both revived by the Abyss Stone, which, after Cha-min's death, now belonged to the killer. Hee-jin couldn't believe the handsome, fair-skinned man was Cha-min. Se-yeon proposed they work together, as only they could see and find the stone. They went to the traffic control center to review camera footage, searching for the stone's glow. After hours of searching, a weary Hee-jin finally spotted its location. Following the camera's path to a specific street, They entered a house to inquire and stumbled upon bloodstains and a woman's body. Following Dong Cheol's lead, they continued searching the streets where Young Cheol had last been seen. Splitting up, Hee-jin was shocked to see Young Cheol, the man who had been threatening her for months. Fortunately, he didn't recognize her. Terrified, she and Se-yeon rushed home. Hee-jin, unwilling to continue, left Se-yeon to deal with the situation alone. Se-yeon noticed Hee-jin's old phone and, upon having it repaired, discovered a listening device. She devised a plan to impersonate Hee-jin and lure Young Cheol to the hospital. Meanwhile, Detective Park, honoring his promise to Se-yeon, fabricated an excuse to leave his press conference announcing the case's closure. Police were immediately dispatched to the hospital to apprehend Young Cheol. Unaware, Young Cheol followed the audio from the bug and Se-yeon's disguised figure into a hospital room. Pulling back the sheet, he was stunned to find the resurrected Cha-min, realizing he had inadvertently brought him back to life a second time. He was about to finish Cha-min off again when someone arrived. Se-yeon rushed in, overjoyed to see Cha-min alive and her plan successful. Detective Park, on the phone, noticed a familiar-looking man. Suddenly, the man turned, threw a blanket over Detective Park's head, and escaped. Unbeknownst to them, Young Cheol, in the elevator, had gone to the emergency room, disguised himself as a severely injured patient, and was transported away by ambulance, bypassing the surrounding police. Back at the station, Miss Eom was causing a commotion, protesting the accusations against her deceased son, Cha-min, as a murderer. When Ae Ran saw the photos of the body, confirming it was her son, she nearly fainted. Cha-min arrived just in time to catch his mother. However, she didn't recognize him. Detective Park was stunned by his appearance. While he had heard Cha-min might be alive, he was still shocked. Overwhelmed, Dong Cheol fainted. After a thorough medical examination in front of Miss Eom, Cha-min was finally able to reclaim his identity as the company director, despite everyone's disbelief. His mother remained unconvinced until she witnessed him expertly handling company matters, finally recognizing her son's familiar competence. Meanwhile, Hee-jin, alerted by a bodyguard about Miss Eom's upcoming doctor's appointment, feigned illness and hid in the restroom. Worried about being exposed for her fake pregnancy, she ordered a positive pregnancy test online. That evening, at the appointment, Hee-jin received a picture of her mother. The person contacting her was Young Cheol. Having discovered Se-yeon's resurrection, Young Cheol kidnapped her parents, threatening them to force Se-yeon's cooperation. Se-yeon, dining with Cha-min's family, received the news and rushed to confront Young Cheol alone. She was ambushed and injected with a paralytic. Young Cheol attempted to kill her father first, but Cha-min arrived just in time and fought him off. Realizing he was outmatched, Young Cheol took Se-yeon's mother hostage. The police arrived, but Young Cheol managed to escape. Fortunately, Prosecutor Seo intercepted him, and Young Cheol was finally apprehended. Back at Se-yeon's old house, retrieving some belongings, they encountered a familiar-looking scrap collector. He gave them a childhood photo of Se-yeon and revealed a crucial detail. The perpetrator in a past incident was a young man, definitely not an older individual. This triggered Se-yeon's memory, realizing there was indeed another person involved at that time. The following day, Hee-jin learned that Cha-min had been resurrected and was now quite handsome. She arranged a meeting with him. It was true that she had initially approached him for his money. It was all an act. But if she only cared about money, why did she cancel the wedding? After spending time with him, she began to desire more than just his wealth. Hee-jin started to yearn for Cha-min to truly be hers. In reality, her life was more difficult than he could imagine. Hee-jin revealed a photo, identifying herself as Young Cheol's daughter. She hadn't wanted to admit it because, although he had nearly beaten her to death as a child, he had also saved her life. Unfortunately, this murderer was also a doctor, and Hee-jin had called off the wedding out of fear for Cha-min's safety. One of Young Cheol's victims was her first love. Later, they called Se-yeon and explained everything. Finally understanding, Se-yeon devised a new plan. She gave Hee-jin a hidden camera to wear when she met with her stepfather. Hee-jin had to find out who his accomplice was and the whereabouts of her mother, whom Young Cheol was holding captive somewhere. In prison, Young Cheol remained nonchalant, seemingly fearless. Hee-jin would be gravely mistaken if she thought his imprisonment rendered him powerless. Did she think he operated alone? He could easily order his associates to harm her mother. He took out the Abyss Stone, contemplating how to use it to orchestrate his grand plans only someone resurrected could achieve. The three returned home to review the recording of young Cheol's words from Hee-jin's visit. Their top priority was finding Hee-jin's mother before the murderer could manipulate someone on the outside to act, which would be incredibly dangerous. Using the photo with the date of young Cheol's arrest, they hoped to find a clue to his escape route, believing Detective Park could provide answers. Se-yeon mentioned she just had dinner with him, but something unpleasant had happened. It seemed Dong Cheol was no longer in the mood to investigate. Indeed, Detective Park was drowning his sorrows in alcohol. Mi-do called, but he drunkenly lashed out, telling her he didn't want to know her anymore. After hanging up, he instantly regretted it, desperate for her to come back, convinced he couldn't live without her. The next day, Se-yeon went to the police station for information on Hee-jin's mother. However, Detective Park was sulking and refused to speak with her, walking away. Se-yeon then questioned Detective Choi, who couldn't help because the prosecution had taken over the case and Jae-wook had confiscated all the data from the cameras. Fortunately, Se-yeon had previously worked with him, so she knew his schedule. They just had to wait for Prosecutor Seo's court appearance to seize their opportunity. Later, with the help of Ko's prosecutor ID, they managed to sneak in. After copying the files, Se-yeon accidentally dropped something and noticed a photo of a murder victim, which aroused her suspicion. Prosecutor Seo was meticulous and never left reference materials lying around. Back home, the three reviewed the footage, searching for the road scene in the video. Cha-min suddenly recognized Jongchun. They immediately set off, despite the dark and desolate forest road, driven by the urgency of saving a life. They arrived at the Soo-jong nursing home and rushed inside, but someone had already taken Hee-jin's mother. Suddenly, a car engine roared to life. They ran outside and gave chase. Cha-min accelerated, keeping close behind the vehicle. Their goal was to ensure the woman's safety. Unbeknownst to them, the person driving the car, with Hee-jin's mother inside, was Prosecutor Seo. The trio unexpectedly lost track of the car they were following upon entering a tunnel. Cha-min immediately floored the gas pedal and, thankfully, spotted it again, only to witness it suddenly veer off the road and crash. Hee-jin jumped out, intending to rescue her mother, but the car exploded, extinguishing any hope of saving her. When the police arrived, they discovered no bodies inside the wreckage. Se-yeon was horrified and disbelieving, having seen two people in the car moments before the crash. Where had they gone? Meanwhile, in prison, Old Man Oh still possessed the Abyss Stone, invisible to everyone else. Young Cheol, suspicious of the stone's power, forced an inmate to strangle another nearly to death. Old Man Oh laughed triumphantly, confirming his ability to resurrect the dead. At home, Hee-jin wept, awaiting news of her mother. A text from an unknown number offered to exchange information. Hesitantly, she betrayed Se-yeon, providing her address in exchange for information about her mother. Lee Mi-do had indeed returned, not from studying abroad, but from plastic surgery. Consequently, no one believed she was the real Mi-do. Furious, she called Detective Park, demanding he bring a fingerprint scanner to the lawyer's office. Assuming she was a delusional harasser, he ignored her. Desperate, Mi-do requested a private meeting with Dong Cheol, threatening to release a photo of a birthmark on his buttocks if he didn't bring the scanner within 30 minutes. Se-yeon arrived, having heard about someone impersonating her. She was startled to see a completely different face. Se-yeon confidently confronted Mi-do, and an argument erupted until Se-yeon recognized Mi-do's voice and saw her ID. Frightened, she ran to Cha-min for help. His solution was simple and extravagant. He bribed Mi-do with a large sum of money to keep her identity secret. Homeless for the night, Se-yeon stayed at Hee-jin's house. Noticing Hee-jin's distress, Se-yeon grabbed her phone and discovered she was texting the culprit. Realizing Mi-do was in the house, Se-yeon rushed over to pull her out and explain, but it was too late. The attacker arrived and stabbed Se-yeon. Cha-min, arriving at the same time, bumped into a man but rushed inside to find Se-yeon gravely wounded. At the hospital, the doctor reported Se-yeon's internal organs were thankfully spared, but her condition was serious due to blood loss. Hee-jin arrived, apologetic and wanting to check on Se-yeon, explaining she had only been thinking of her mother. Enraged, Cha-min emptied his wallet, gave the money to Hee-jin, and told her never to contact him or Se-yeon again. Thankfully, Se-yeon woke up, diffusing the tension. refusing to let anyone leave. She insisted Hee-jin stay with her until she had atoned for her actions. Detective Park and Mai-do arrived, prompting Se-yeon to reveal her resurrection. Even after the fingerprint scan, Dong Cheol remained skeptical, though he had witnessed Cha-min's revival. They were both stunned, as was Hee-jin, who had also been resurrected. Were they zombies, or was resurrection the new trend? Their immediate concern was capturing the attacker's accomplice, still at large. They devised a plan to trap him, staging a scenario where he believed he had killed Se-yeon. That night, the attacker sat in Prosecutor Seo's car. He, surprisingly, was the mastermind. Jae-wook, knowing the attacker had lied about completing the job, killed him and staged a car accident, even providing a fabricated suicide note to the police. Meanwhile, Cha-min waited in the library for Se-yeon to fall asleep. A spark ignited between them. Se-yeon boldly asked for a kiss, and seeing his hesitation, pulled him closer and kissed him. After a moment, Cha-min responded with a sweet kiss of his own. Go Se-yeon dreamt she was the school's most beautiful girl, adored by many boys, including Cha-min. During P class, Se-yeon's beauty sparked jealousy among other girls, leading to a confrontation. Luckily, several boys came to her rescue. Everything seemed perfect until Cha-min, while catching a ball, accidentally kissed Se-yeon, stunning everyone. As Se-yeon reaffirmed her goddess status, Cha-min unexpectedly brought up the kiss, challenging her with, "Look at this handsome face. Does it look like the clueless kid from back then?" Suddenly, he was surrounded by admiring girls, leaving Se-yeon flustered. She woke up with a jolt to find Cha-min leaning over her with concern. Looking at his handsome face and enticing lips, Se-yeon felt like she was still dreaming. She rushed to the mirror, furious at her own reflection. Why did he get reborn with such a handsome face, she fumed. At breakfast, Se-yeon couldn't focus. The dream, the lips, yesterday's kiss. She replayed her dream self, the adored goddess Go Se-yeon. Acting haughty, she left Cha-min to finish breakfast alone. Watching her adorable demeanor, Cha-min made a note on his phone. The day of my first kiss with Se-yeon. On the way to work, Cha-min's sharp suit and the romantic music playing in the car fueled Se-yeon's overactive imagination. She commented on his attire, asking if he was trying to impress someone. In her usual sassy tone, she teased him, only to learn he had a meeting with shareholders and needed to dress the part. Meanwhile, Ae-ran, Cha-min's mother, was investigating the girl her son was smitten with. As long as her son was happy, she didn't care about the girl's past. Ae-ran's primary concern was getting rid of Hee-jin. Speak of the devil, and she shall appear. Hee-jin arrived, only to be confronted by Ae-ran about her fake pregnancy. Ae-ran produced the ultrasound images, exposing Hee-jin's lies and kicking her out. Cornered, Hee-jin threatened to reveal a secret that could destroy Ae-ran's cosmetics company, Lan Cosmetics, before storming off. At the company, Cha-min inquired about a case at the Golden Palace in the Dojin district. Detective Lee informed him that Detective Park had made a strange request. Apparently, Detective Park had staged a murder to set a trap. He asked to be notified if anyone inquired about the case, but no one had. At Se-yeon's family's restaurant, her parents argued about selling their property and moving. Se-yeon's heart ached watching her mother fiercely defend their home. She entered, using the name Mai-do to comfort her. Outside, Cha-min treated his employees to chicken. Se-yeon, still posing as Mai-do, called her mother to offer support. When a food order came in, Se-yeon expertly handled it, assisting her mother with the preparations. Back at the company, the male lead overheard two women chatting about getting proposed to. He innocently asked how women like to be confessed to, his naive expression making everyone laugh. At the chicken restaurant, the female lead discovered Lan's cosmetic company employee ID card. Cha-min, really, she chuckled, turning back to clean up. After finishing, her mother made chicken and rice. Watching her best friend eat with habits just like her daughter's, she asked the name of the culprit who kept calling her granddaughter Se-yeon. Could it be? She wondered. Hearing this, the female lead immediately denied it. A colleague reported that the perpetrator had been caught, but he was already dead, leaving no clues. Although the female lead knew this was a cover-up, she had no proof. Prosecutor Seo Jae-wook called Dong Cheol about the net casting case. The other end of the line mentioned Jae-UK. Finding things interesting, Seo Jae-wook invited him to lunch to talk further. While the female lead worried about her plan being exposed, Cha-min, dressed in a suit, prepared a romantic confession for her. Hearing Se-yeon describe the current situation, Cha-min realized it wasn't the right time and pretended nothing was happening. However, fate intervened as Se-yeon accidentally opened the trunk. The male lead hastily hid everything, forcing her to take back the car keys. At that moment, Se-yeon discovered a camera on the back of the car. Checking together, they found something strange in the tunnel. Meanwhile, Jae-wook had lunch with Dong Cheol. A large wound on his hand piqued his friend's curiosity. It turned out he'd injured his hand while staging a fake scene in the tunnel to help the mother escape. Jae-wook pretended to ask for Mi-doo's phone number for investigative purposes. They then went to the tunnel to look for clues. As suspected, the anonymous phone number confirmed Se-yeon was still alive. He received news that Jang Sun-young had burned her hand and immediately went to deal with it, fearing the landlady would call an ambulance. The trio followed the tunnel path tirelessly, finding nothing. Taking a taxi back, they luckily encountered a driver who recognized the patient in the photo. Arriving at the house, they found no one home, as they had gone to the hospital. Hee-jin, worried, searched for her mother in the dark and accidentally sprained her ankle, requiring a hospital visit. While buying food, the female lead ran into Jae-wook. He kept mentioning Hee-jin's mother, enticing her into his car. Cha-min received a text from Se-yeon and later discovered Hee-jin's mother at the hospital. The caregiver mentioned prosecutor Jae-wook had hired her, surprising him. Meanwhile, Se-yeon, oblivious, rode in the killer's car to a secluded location, unaware of the danger. Until someone called Jae-wook with news about finding a daughter, Hee-jin's scream alerted her to the danger she was in. Se-yeon immediately called Cha-min, giving him her location, and then hid in the bathroom to wait for him. By the time Cha-min arrived to rescue her, Jae-wook had already left. She burst into tears and clung to him. Later, Jae-wook sent a message revealing that Oh Young-cheol's ex-wife came from a nearby nursing home. Returning home, Se-yeon questioned her aunt for more information but found no clues. Because the timing coincided with the kidnappers' escape the previous Tuesday, Dong Cheol went directly to Jae-wook's office the next morning to ask why he had hidden Jang Sun-young. Meanwhile, Cha-min took Se-yeon and her mother to Se-young's house, while he went to his own. Se-yeon shyly mentioned that they had only just kissed and it felt a bit rushed to be living together already. It turned out Cha-min had a secret hideout, filled with things he couldn't bear to throw away, including photos with his father. Despite his mother forbidding it, Cha-min had secretly visited his father a few times before he died. The man who was a weak and inadequate husband in his mother's eyes was a perfect father in Cha-min's. Recalling the past, Cha-min admitted he had once hated the person who gave him the stone, but over time, it became a cherished gift. Se-yeon thanked him for saving her and, inquiring about a pink gift box, learned it was the first gift she had ever given him. She smirked, wondering if he was genuinely clueless or just pretending. It had been Valentine's Day, a day when women traditionally give gifts to men in Korea. Cha-min, flustered, asked what it meant and why she, specifically, had given him a gift. Se-yeon, embarrassed, tried to leave but bumped into the wall. As they were about to kiss, Cha-min accidentally pressed the door open button, pushing Se-yeon out where she ran into his manager, who caught them almost kissing. Later, while eating, the manager confided that Se-yeon must be special to be shown the secret room. No one had ever been allowed in there before. She had thought Cha-min's first love would be the first person he brought there. During the meal, Se-yeon received news that Lee Mi-doo had quit her job. Shocked, she rushed over to Mi-doo's house to confront her. Mi-doo was strangely calm, and Dong Cheol being there fanning Se-yeon only added to her disbelief. The two lovebirds had gotten back together. Se-yeon reminded Dong Cheol that he didn't have time for frivolous romance, but he quickly explained he was just returning from Jae-wook's place. Jae-wook had told him that Cho Gi-hun had handed the person over, acting so convincingly that they completely believed him and his alibi for the kidnapping of Mrs. Jang. Having lost a vital clue, Mi-doo flattered Se-yeon to avoid her wrath. On the other side, Mrs. Yang panicked after seeing the news about the murderer reenacting the crime scene. Dong Cheol also warned his girlfriend to avoid letting Se-yeon see any news reports or television to prevent her from being frightened. Chief Justice Seo Chin-sik was reading the newspaper about the case when someone sent him a letter containing a picture of his son and information about someone wanting to discuss something with him. The murderer was carrying some sort of ball and tried to open a door but wasn't allowed. A police officer informed Dong Cheol of their suspicion towards the receptionist on duty the night of the incident. They believe she brought Mrs. Young to the scene and disappeared at the same time as her. Afterward, the murderer entered the crime scene and reenacted the murder, even watering plants. When he requested a needle and thread, Dong Cheol asked if he was sure, questioning if he had stitched up Se-yeon the same way. After some thought, the murderer insisted he hadn't stitched Se-yeon. As he was being prepared to return to prison, the murderer requested to use the restroom, claiming that if he watered the plants there, the reporters would publish negative stories about the police station. They had to comply with his request. After waiting for a while without hearing any sound, a police officer broke down the door to find the murderer foaming at the mouth. Not wanting to get fired, they had a female officer transport the murderer. Unbeknownst to them, she was an accomplice. It turned out that in prison, the old man had obtained some detergent and bleach. The woman had visited him, pleading to repay him for helping her get rid of her despicable father. He said before being reborn he needed to do one thing. They went to Seoul, and Mai-do took the female lead home, carefully warning Chairman Min to prevent her from seeing any outside news. Remembering the warning, Chairman Min took her to a secret room, where they read stories and played, reminiscing about their childhood. Suddenly, someone called from outside Chairman Min's mother. He had kept this secret room hidden for 5 years and couldn't come out, even though his loved one needed to deal with her sadness. As she was about to leave, she received a call from her best friend. Like many best friends, their long phone conversation left Se-yeon feeling quite frustrated. Finally, she left. The female lead hurried to the bathroom. Afterward, she wanted to go outside for a walk and listen to some relaxing music after being confined in the stuffy room. Suddenly, Chairman Min received a call from his close friend warning him not to let her go outside because the murderer had escaped. He rushed outside to call her, but their garden was vast, and she was wearing headphones, so she was completely unaware. In the distance, Chairman Min saw a flickering light. The murderer, Dong Cheol, was stealthily following the female lead when he was suddenly struck by Mrs. Young with a rock. He immediately chased after her. The female lead, happily listening to music, received a call from Cha-min. Returning to check the security footage, she found nothing suspicious, though Cha-min had seen the light from the abyss. It seemed strange. When she held it, it glowed green, but now it was a dark purple. Se-yeon recalled seeing it as yellow, changing color after her revival. So, Cha-min had indeed seen its light. Se-yeon immediately went to Hee-jin and her mother. After Mrs. Young rested, they informed them about the old man's escape. Hee-jin was terrified, realizing their lives were in danger. Se-yeon returned to the secret room to sleep, but she couldn't rest. Sneaking out, she bumped into someone. It was Cha-min, who had fallen asleep at her door, guarding her. Sitting on the floor wasn't ideal, so Cha-min suggested they sleep together. He rationally justified his decision, but Se-yeon remained restless lying next to him. She heard soft snores. Could he really sleep so soundly next to such a beauty? As she whispered her complaint, Cha-min pulled her closer. It turned out he wasn't asleep either. As he leaned in for a kiss, a knock interrupted them. Cha-min silently vowed to fire whoever disturbed them. They discovered a bloody rock with Dong Cheol and Mrs. Young's hair in the garden. Upon hearing this, Hee-jin wanted to take her mother and run. Despite constant police patrols, the old man knew their location. They decided to go to Mai-do's house. Before leaving, Mrs. Young instinctively dialed her son's number, a phone currently held by Jae-wook. In an abandoned house, the old man looked into the abyss and declared that the murderer they were investigating would soon cease to exist. The scene shifted to Cha-min asking Se-yeon to accompany him to work, making it easier to protect her. His subordinate reported this to Cha-min's mother. The news of a girl entering her son's house, sleeping and sharing a bathroom with him, infuriated her. At the company, everyone gossiped about the girl favored by the director. Cha-min, handsome and capable, was the reason many female employees worked there. Meanwhile, Se-yeon worried about her parents' safety and wanted to visit them. Unbeknownst to her, Dong Cheol had taken them to a safe haven, providing victim protection and a credit card in Cha-min's name for their expenses. Unexpectedly, Cha-min's mother visited Mai-do's parents with a marriage proposal and a large sum of money as a gift, enraging them and leading to her expulsion. Mai-doo's parents then called to scold her. Hearing that her father had fallen ill from the shock, Mai-doo returned home to explain, leaving Yang Hee-jin and her mother at her place. Outside, Jae-wook met with the old man, urging him to stay put while he handled things. Without the resurrection stone to redo his life, Jae-wook remained skeptical. Hadn't he killed Se-yeon, yet she was still alive? He recalled the day of the incident, rushing to Se-yeon's house and finding her barely breathing. He hadn't hesitated to finish the job. Now, the old man planned to lure Se-yeon out, kill her again, and be reborn in his beloved daughter Soo-jin's body. Mrs. Yang, sleepwalking, became lost in the middle of the street. Finally, she called her son, and the phone fell into Jae-wook's hands. He switched it off, gave her a sedative, and took her to the old man. They were about to drink and talk when Mrs. Yang intervened, allowing her son to escape, just like years ago. Jae-wook recalled his father's brutal beatings, remembering someone who had similarly stopped his father before. Just as the old man was about to attack Mrs. Yang again, Jae-wook stopped him. The three of them reenacted the scene of domestic violence from the past. As the old man was about to kill Jae-wook, they heard police sirens. The police arrived to find Mrs. Yang unconscious. Jae-wook had already fled. He flashed back to his childhood, when he helped Seo Chun-sik cover up his crimes. Meanwhile, Judge Seo Chun-sik met with the person who held his secret. This person demanded that he reveal the truth about Jae-wook to atone for his past sins against his son. The scene shifted to the male and female leads checking the blood test results. They discovered blood from both the old man and his son at the crime scene. The old man had forced his son to help him kill people. Remembering Tae-jin, the female lead suspected that he had orchestrated his son's death and then resurrected him in another body to help him kill. They went to Hee-jin for more information, then took her home to rest. The female lead stayed at the hospital and encountered Jae-wook visiting Mrs. Yang. Afterward, he called the old man to give him the location so he could retrieve Mrs. Yang's body. In her room, the female lead examined a painting by Mrs. Yang and found 2 phone numbers written on it. One belonged to her daughter, Hee-jin. The other looked familiar, possibly Tae-jin's. She immediately called the number. At the same time, Jae-wook's phone rang, but he couldn't answer because Cha-min was with him. Se-yeon heard the ringing and followed the sound, catching Jae-wook. She pulled up his shirt, revealing a wound on his shoulder. Remembering recent clues, she asked if he was Tae-jin. He immediately denied it and whispered into the female lead's ear, "I exist as Jae-wook, just like how you exist. Who would believe you? Even Se-yeon doesn't exist." The male and female leads could only watch in dismay as the killer left. He dragged his wounded body to Hee-jin, only managing to say, "I'm Tae-jin," and begged her to save him before collapsing. Hee-jin took care of her brother. Looking at the scar on his forehead, she remembered the violence she suffered from her father years ago. He used words that wounded both children physically and mentally. Meanwhile, the female lead was worried and wanted to visit Hee-jin, but was stopped. Cha-min didn't want the person he loved to be in danger again. During the old case, he had lost sleep and weight when he learned about Se-yeon's accident. At this point, the female lead recounted why she was always stubborn as a child, doing what she liked despite being stopped. Cha-min had given her courage, a knight in the shadows doing everything, and she didn't have to lift a finger. Se-yeon thanked him for always being there for her, no matter what happened. The scene shifted to Jae-wook, who returned home and helplessly looked at his father sitting imposingly in his chair. Jae-wook informed him that Se-yeon knew their identities from the bloodstains. The old man didn't seem to care much. He stitched the wound on Jae-wook's shoulder and then left. At the police station, everyone was trying to figure out how to prove the identities of the father-son killers when Mai-doo angrily arrived. It was also because the female lead had been impersonating Mai-doo, causing trouble everywhere. At home, the male lead was blaming his mother for doing terrible things. Back at the police station, Dong Cheol secretly entered Jae-wook's room to find a strand of his hair for testing. Before he could find anything, he was discovered. He immediately revealed his true purpose. Perhaps because of his honesty and sincerity, he was favored by the heavens. As the two were arguing, Chief Prosecutor Chun-sik entered and ordered his son to comply, also giving Dong Cheol a sample of his own hair. He told Jae-wook that this was definitely his karma. At the shopping mall, the female lead was working as an assistant and was with Cha-min checking new products. Initially, she disliked the job, but when she saw that her friend was surrounded by many beautiful women, Se-yeon suddenly felt uncomfortable. Despite being surrounded by girls, Cha-min only liked the feeling of holding a bag while waiting for her to go take care of her business. They received news that Hee-jin and her mother had left and went to the hospital. At that time, Hee-jin was with her brother, going to see their father. At the police station, Dong-cheol was scolded by his superior for daring to suspect a high-ranking prosecutor. The DNA test results revealed that the chief prosecutor and Jae-wook were father and son. It turned out that he had meddled in this matter. Jae-wook went to the room to thank his father. After finishing, his father went to the nursing home to do something. When the female lead received the test results, she suddenly lost faith in herself. Cha-min immediately comforted her. That night, Se-yeon was restless and couldn't sleep. The male lead took her to an open field where they could see the entire city to heal her. Indeed, Se-yeon felt very relaxed. The two talked a lot. When she said she liked him, Cha-min immediately jumped up. "Then why did you refuse me so many times when I confessed?" Se-yeon said that she intended to agree after refusing him a few times, but Cha-min had given up too soon and said that there would be someone better, more worthy of her. Se-yeon was rambling about the ideal time to confess when her friend kissed her. "The best time is right now." Cha-min gave his crush the necklace that she liked, and then read the cheesy confessions he had collected from his phone, ending with the most fatal line, "I like you, will you be my girlfriend?" This time, Se-yeon agreed immediately. The next day, Park Gi-man was on the phone making an appointment with the male lead, when he accidentally hit a mother and daughter nearby. Gi-man, flustered, got out of the car to apologize. This scene was caught by the man with the earring, who reported to the mastermind that they had found a way to lure Park Gi-man. He returned home to eat when the police arrived, accusing him of hit and run. At the police station, he was completely cornered, with no chance to deny the charges. Meanwhile, the male and female leads couldn't find Gi-man, and suspected something had happened to him. At the same time, Se-yeon received a message from Hee-jin asking to meet. On the other side, Hee-jin cooperated with the old man to lure the female lead out, in exchange for a certain condition. Of course, the male and female lead group were careful and sent someone to the strange address to check, then went together, anticipating trouble. While the old man was confidently waiting for his prey, the police arrived at the house and arrested the receptionist who helped him. At the same time, the female lead received a message from Hee-jin. The old man knew Hee-jin could see the light of the abyss and threatened her mother in order to exploit her, but he didn't know how to use the abyss. Hee-jin said she would use that opportunity to fight him. But what opportunity was there when Hee-jin, as soon as she revealed her hand, was beaten by the old man? She held a syringe with poison in her hand, preferring death rather than using the abyss to help him. Suddenly, they heard police voices downstairs. He used Mrs. Yong's life to threaten her into holding the abyss orb, then injected the poison into his own body. In the end, both of them were taken to the hospital for emergency care. They found Mrs. Yong's body in a remote mountainous area, and at the same time, the old man stopped breathing. The abyss returned to Cha-min's hands. Hee-jin was heartbroken knowing that her mother had passed away. She hoped Cha-min would use the abyss to resurrect her mother. In the end, Hee-jin decided to request an autopsy on her mother's body to find clues to make Ot-jin, living in Jae-wook's body, pay for his wicked deeds. At the hospital, the man with the earring went to see the family of the pregnant woman. He gave them a large sum of money to ignore any negotiation from the other side. Then, he went back to his car to report to Se-yeon sick, handing over the memory card with the car accident video and receiving a large stack of cash in return. On the other side, Dong-cheol proposed to his loved one in an unexpected way. The male and female leads went to eat with everyone from the company. Se-yeon ate to her heart's content, while Cha-min was annoyed that his girlfriend didn't show any jealousy, since clearly he was the one attracting all the women now. Why was Se-yeon still so calm? He did everything he could to make her jealous when he received a cake from a female employee, but she remained indifferent. It wasn't until Cha-min saw Se-yeon's marking letter placed on the female employee's desk that he immediately became happy again, affirming that he already had a girlfriend and wouldn't eat cake made by others. As they were happily in love, the male lead received news that Gi-man had been charged with a hit and run. Arriving there and talking to Gi-man, he was certain he always checked the memory card in the camera. The results showed nothing. The victim had resolutely refused to settle or give out any contact information. Se-yeon asked a friend at the police station to contact the victim's family, who, after being repeatedly called, panicked and asked the man with the earring for help. He then posed as a lawyer and met the male and female leads. Not being a legal expert, Se-yeon quickly realized he was a fake and followed him to expose his lies, using law to scare him pale. Since it was a confidential company, there was no more customer information. He could only describe the person's appearance: a big nose, long eyes, and a protruding lower lip. Se-yeon drew a symbolic picture, leaving the male lead speechless. Right now, they could only hope for the victim to speak up. Suddenly, the female lead received breaking news. She had a picture of the killer. But it was a photo of Lee Seung-hun, the final victim in the Eom-sen neighborhood case. It turned out that the old man and the killer were accomplices from the beginning. She immediately ran to find him and warned him, certain that Se-yeon would find the clues to expose his heinous crimes. Jae-wook didn't believe this photo had reached Se-yeon. He recalled years ago, when his friend Lee Seung-hun came to see him, using Jae-wook's secret identity to trade for a position in the court and erase all traces. Jae-wook had decided to silence him for good. While the female lead was trying to find clues, Chief Prosecutor Seo Chen-sik suggested that his son move abroad to live in hiding. This caused an internal conflict between the two. Jae-wook refused the offer, saying that they would share the same fate and consequences, shocking the chief prosecutor. At the hospital, Se-yeon's group went to sign the autopsy papers for Mrs. Young. The female lead went ahead because Hee-jin couldn't bear to look at her mother's body. After waiting outside for too long, Hee-jin went to find her friend alone and was unfortunately captured by the villains. Right after that, the female lead received a message from Hee-jin saying she needed time to heal. When the female lead hired a car to take Mrs. Young's body back, she discovered that the driver was Jae-wook. Being alone, she was knocked unconscious. Then, the male lead received a message asking him to come to a certain address. The funeral driver was found unconscious on the road. Dong Cheol reported this, and Cha-min only then realized that his girlfriend was in danger. When he contacted Se-yeon, Jae-wook answered, asking him to secretly come to the docks to save his lover, or the consequences would be dire. At this time, Se-yeon was alone in a frozen container, while Hee-jin was tied up outside. Because Jae-wook knew about Mrs. Young's rebirth, he pushed the heavy suitcase that seemed to contain her into the sea to destroy the evidence. Jae-wook met Cha-min, wanting to take the abyss, but he couldn't see it. Suddenly, a car crashed into Jae-wook. He lay there barely breathing, refusing to say where Se-yeon was held, frustrating the male lead immensely. He picked up the abyss, determined. Finally, the male lead managed to rescue the freezing Se-yeon. Dong Cheol also arrived with his team. Hee-jin woke up to see only bloodstains. The person was gone. At the hospital, Cha-min told Se-yeon, distraught, that he had used the stone to resurrect the killer once again because he was afraid of losing her. At the police station, Dong Cheol recklessly blamed Jae-wook, angering his superiors. Now, they could only rely on DNA testing. After some time, they were informed that the blood at the scene was mixed with sodium hydroxide, making it impossible to get results. It turned out that he had foreseen this, captured the video on the camera, and then fled. Back to planning with his team, Dong Cheol said that Jae-wook was still considered a victim, so they couldn't issue an arrest warrant. There was no evidence, only Hee-jin's fingerprints on the car. The male and female leads returned home, using the female lead's mother's ability to spread false rumors to help. The next day, the media reported that the prosecutor's son was the biological son of a serial killer. The news went viral. Dong Cheol said the prosecution would look into this. "We will be criticized by the public. My boss will yell at me, I will yell at you, you will yell at the subordinate, and someone will be fired or have their salary cut." In the end, the police team decided to investigate first to avoid being implicated. The assistant didn't believe the rumors, but she accidentally found a piece of paper with a picture of a boy in a gift box, related to the photo Se-yeon had before, and went to meet her. At this time, the killer T-jin threatened Seo Chen-sik to keep in contact with him, or face dire consequences. In the secret room, Se-yeon was looking for clues to the point where she fell asleep. Cha-min saw this and carried her back to bed. In her sleep, The female lead repeatedly called for Cha-min to be by her side. The next morning, Se-yeon was surprised that her boyfriend had personally cooked a whole table of her favorite dishes. They were preparing to leave for a healing trip when Cha-min's mother caught them. She didn't understand how they were so close but not married yet. The assistant explained that this was how the new generation was, dating without being committed. At this point, she only hoped her son would get married so she could hand over the company. Unexpectedly, the male lead took Se-yeon to the place where her parents were vacationing. Everything was familiar yet strange. It turned out that today was the old man's birthday. The male lead's thoughtfulness surprised both Se-yeon and her parents. While everyone was happy, the male lead's mother suddenly arrived. Mrs. Ran wanted to relax, not expecting guests here. So, the two families met in an unexpected situation. In the past, the two families had misunderstandings, so the party atmosphere became heavy. With the alcohol flowing, words came out. Cha-min immediately stood up to offer a toast, and the two sides became drinking buddies, chatting happily without realizing it. With family matters settled, the male and female leads took the opportunity to stroll. Cha-min took out a proposal ring from his pocket, giving it to her first because he didn't know if it was the right time. When Se-yeon was ready, she could wear it. Cha-min said he would always be by her side no matter what happened. Despite expressing his feelings so clearly, the male lead still hadn't slept with her, which confused Se-yeon. A moment later, Cha-min returned, saying he couldn't hold back anymore, and they kissed for a long time. That night, Se-yeon woke up. The old man, in a drunken state, kept calling his daughter's name, giving her pocket money, which made her very happy. Inside the room, Cha-min was fascinated, holding the purple abyss, when Se-yeon came in to share the good news. The next morning, seeing the couple come out of one room, the old man sadly went fishing. Cha-min approached him to talk, saying he had once thought that Cha-min was the most suitable person for his daughter, but now he was with another girl. Cha-min was surprised when he was acknowledged by his girlfriend's father. He was overjoyed and immediately recorded a video of the compliments. After a happy day, the male and female leads continued their search for clues. Cha-min had rented a new apartment next to the killer's house to have a chance to break in and find more evidence. At this moment, he arrived at the police station, injured, wanting to interrogate something. It turned out the break-in had been discovered. After a struggle, Se-yeon finally obtained evidence of his collusion with the old man killer. If Jae-wook's fingerprints were found on the scissors and Se-yeon's blood was found, they could prove his guilt. At the same time, he also knew the scissors had disappeared. They only needed to wait until the next day for the results. The group of friends drank so much that they didn't recognize their loved ones. While Cha-min went to call Sister Hugh, a junk dealer suddenly came up to ask if he had followed his destined calling, speaking cryptic words before leaving. After that, the group of friends went out to play, sing, and happily enjoy the peaceful moments. Overdoing the playing, the male and female leads ended up going home and messing with Mrs. Ran. The next morning, the two could only kneel down to apologize to their mother. She suspected their no-name relationship. Se-yeon then said that after resolving the internal issues, she would propose to Cha-min, and at that time, she hoped her mother would agree. On the other side, Jae-wook arrogantly said that illegally obtained evidence was not admissible. Right after that, Dong-cheol held a meeting with the board of directors, holding the test paper. The results were a match, just as Se-yeon predicted. However, the medical report did not record any neck wounds, suggesting the medical examiner was problematic. He had quit his job. The police team immediately went to the airport to find him. After a chase, they successfully arrested him. This person confessed to being bribed by Jae-wook. The killer was recalling the old man's last words, Sejong nursing home. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Dong-cheol entered, holding a search warrant. They quickly found the embroidery scissors in the kitchen cabinet. It turned out that the male lead had sneaked into the house and placed the scissors there. Everything was going according to plan. Se-yeon also discovered that the abyss stone had turned purple, only usable one more time. While the police station received the results and sent people to arrest Jae-wook, he had already taken a pile of money to hire someone to retrieve something. Back in the secret room, Cha-min looked at the list of his life goals he had made years ago. Se-yeon had refused to do these things with him because they weren't lovers yet. Now, Cha-min wanted to achieve them with his girlfriend. The killer had arrived at the nursing home, sending photos of Se-yeon's sick son to threaten him. Indeed, this was his weak spot. Jae-wook then demanded that he delete the rumors and declare that he was his son. Se-yeon, sick, terrified, immediately complied. Then, he called someone to ask for help. At this point, the killer took his son to his base. Unexpectedly, on the day Se-yeon sick went live, standing in front of the reporters, he admitted that the rumors were true. He confessed to killing his wife 25 years ago with his own hands. His biological son had suffered brain damage. It turned out that he had hired someone to protect his son, in return for exposing his crimes before the law. At this time, the couple were healing by the river. Cha-min looked at the abyss, thinking that if the light disappeared, the owner would also disappear. Cha-min set the orb aside, enjoying a peaceful life with his loved one. The two of them made a large time capsule and buried it under an old tree in the amusement park. Meanwhile, Jae-wook received a gun and a phone with someone's location. While the male and female leads were having fun at the amusement park, Jae-wook suddenly appeared and used the gun to hold Se-yeon hostage. The two struggled for a while, accidentally shooting Se-yeon. The male lead, furious, shot Jae-wook in the leg to stop him from running away, and the police arrived to arrest him. Cha-min took his loved one to his private home and used the abyss to resurrect Se-yeon. The orb's light went out, and Cha-min slowly began to disappear. He hoped that his loved one would live happily. When the female lead woke up, she was in a hospital bed. The abyss was there as well. Dong Cheol gave her a recording of Cha-min's instructions. It seemed that he had foreseen this would happen. At home, Mrs. Ae-ran was preparing new bedding for the young couple when her subordinate reported that her son was missing. She tried her best to reassure herself, saying that her son would return someday. Se-yeon went to see the killer's trial. In the end, he was sentenced to death. Jae-wook kept ranting that Se-yeon was not dead, even calling his father, the chief prosecutor, who couldn't save him. With revenge served, Se-yeon felt no joy. Now, her companion had disappeared, but there was still one important thing to do. Se-yeon took the DNA test results to her parents. After many days of waiting, her family was reunited. Then, Se-yeon went to visit Mrs. Eom Ae-ran, who was sleeping. The female lead returned to the secret room, listening to the music again. Looking at the memories of her loved one, she felt a pang of sorrow. Her aunt also handed over Cha-min's phone for her to keep. Returning home, Se-yeon saw the abyss orb again. She clearly remembered leaving it in Cha-min's room. Not caring much about it, Se-yeon looked through Cha-min's phone and watched the video of her father acknowledging him, which brought her to tears. Cha-min had proposed to her, and Se-yeon realized that she couldn't live without him. Time passed, and 3 years later, Mi-do opened her own law firm. On the day Mi-do married Dong Cheol, the female lead decided to return to her old house, thinking that perhaps when Cha-min returned, he would come looking for her there. Hee-jin returned to her hometown, growing vegetables and raising fish, happily living peaceful days. The female lead still kept writing in her diary, as if she was talking to Cha-min. Even though she was living well, her longing never subsided. Every night, she listened to his voice and slowly fell asleep. In the following days, Se-yeon used her crime-solving experience and sharp words to put criminals in jail. After work, she went to the amusement park she had visited with Cha-min. Suddenly, a child dropped their ice cream. While she was feeling sorry for the child, a familiar voice comforted her. Cha-min was standing there. She wanted to stay in this magical moment forever. Cha-min, in flesh and blood, was right there. That night, lying next to each other, Se-yeon was curious, so he recounted what had happened in the past 3 years. He had seen them reporting that he would not be able to return. Cha-min had always been there, but Se-yeon couldn't see him until one day, an old man in a Santa suit approached and helped him. There was one thing Se-yeon didn't know. The abyss had run out of energy, but always existed next to Cha-min, meaning when the female lead saw the abyss, her loved one was also there. After telling the story, Se-yeon fell asleep. Then, they went to find the time capsule. Returning home, the male lead looked at the abyss, recalling what the old man in a Santa suit had said. "The orb is a wonderful gift. It will always be by your side until another wonderful thing appears." Suddenly, the orb disappeared. Se-yeon frantically ran out, flustered, and handed him a pregnancy test stick. 2 lines, Cha-min had to throw a party right away. He then showed her his time capsule. Inside were the baby items he had prepared. After that, they fought and made up, just like any other couple.